Now I'm going to share a very brief introductory slide so that I can tell you a little bit more about Daniela and about her background. So hopefully you can see my slides. Daniela is our fourth speaker for this semester. And I'm very excited to have Daniela here as part of the Sustainable Solutions lecture series. I wanted to change slide 1 second, my computer doesn't let me. I would like to acknowledge all our partners that are supporting the Sustainable Solutions Lectures series, the University of Massachusetts Amherst, UMass Boston, University of Massachusetts Dartmouth, University of Massachusetts Lowell, and also at UMass Amherst, the School of Earth and Sustainability, the School of Public Policy, at UMass Lowell, the RIST Institute, our friends at the UMass Boston Sustainable Solutions Lab, our friends at the Stone Living Lab, and then the Naturance Network. Naturance is a project funded by the European Union that includes a large network of universities, a consortium of universities, including the universities of Venice, the London School of Economics, Cambridge University, and many more. I would like just to mention the goal of the Sustainable Solution Lectures. We would like to explore new strategies together to create a community to support sustainability. And when I think about the community, we think about research collaborations across universities, but also possible cross-sectoral partnerships between the private sector, the public sector, and academia. So thank you for being here and for being part of this community. We will continue the Sustainable Solutions Lectures next year, and this week on Friday we have an additional event in partnership with the City of Boston. I will send the notification to everybody. Probably you've already received one, and there is going to be one more reminder before the event. So here we are, welcoming Daniela to our lecture series. Thank you, Daniela, for being here. I know you've been super busy lately, so it's even more precious for us to have you here. Daniela is a senior expert in nature-based solutions and biodiversity at ICLEI Europe. Her talk will focus on nature-positive economy. The title is What the World Needs is a Nature-Positive Economy. As I mentioned, Daniela is senior expert at ICLEI. She coordinates multiple projects, including the NetworkNature Project, and I think Daniela is going to tell us a little bit about this. Maybe I would prefer to transfer directly to Daniela so that we can spend more time with her and she can tell us everything about her work. So welcome, Daniela. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Marta. It's my big pleasure to be here. Thanks everyone who joined and have the precious time to bring together here. I would like to share my slides so then we can jump right in. Why I put such a provocative title. Just a tiny sec. Bear with me. Yep. Share. Can you just tell me, Marta, if you're seeing it?
Almost. Now, yes. Thank you.
No, perfect. Thank you. All right, so let's start. So good morning and good afternoon, because I think you will have people from different parts of the globe here. Thank you for having me. I will be presenting today to you some insights from Go Nature Positive, and we're going to dive a bit into the concept of a nature positive economy and why I think the world actually needs such a concept and actually such an economy. I'll walk you through what a nature positive economy is and how it could be operationalized and the kinds of policy, practice, and system shifts that are required to make it a reality. So in this slide, you can see, probably you're going to recognize this, this graphic from Röckström. Our economies really depend fundamentally on nature. And we are pushing beyond the safe ecological boundaries. As you know, there isn't only an environmental crisis at the moment, there is an economic one. So without functioning ecosystems, Our food systems, our water cycles, and even health and infrastructure face compounding risks. So business as usual undermines long-term resilience and prosperity for us. The climate and biodiversity crisis are deeply interconnected, as we know, and they are systemic. So our response must be equally systemic and forward-looking. So a nature-positive economy ensures that the net result of all economic activity leads to a measurable increase in nature, moving us toward full recovery by 2050. We're using here the idea of full recovery that is brought up by IPBES and also by the Global Biodiversity Framework. This means going beyond minimizing harm to actively regenerate ecosystems. It also means promoting social equity as a core outcome. So this vision aligns with the Global Biodiversity Framework. It aligns also with the Sustainable Development Goals and the broader shift that we need for more inclusive societies. So in the Go Nature Positive project, we have the goal to accelerate this kind of transformative change in terms of a nature positive economy. So we have been engaging with policymakers, with investors, with businesses, and the civil society. Our work focuses on clarifying what a nature positive economy is, aligning policy and practice, and creating indicators to measure progress. We want also to make sure that we have real world implementation. So we have some pilots, and I'm going to talk about them as well. Diving a little bit more into the concept. So one key challenge that we found is the conceptual confusion. As you know, there are many green terms in use out there. So there is talks of green economy, there is the circular economy, there is the bioeconomy, there is ESG, there is net zero. There's, of course, you heard about the donuts economy, regenerative economy, post-growth economy. So there are many, many concepts. We have noticed that this risks that the term nature positive gets diluted or co-opted. So we need to be clear that a nature positive economy means that the result of all economic activity is leading to an increase in nature, leading to recovery. This is the vision we're working with. So think about us having more nature in 2030 than what we had in 2020 and continuing recovery thereafter. So to achieve this systemic vision, we require cross-sectoral and coordinated action. Operationalizing a nature-positive economy means embedding this vision across government, business, finance, communities, and standard bodies. So we're having conversations with actually 8 target groups. It's about integrating nature-positive principles at multiple scales, so from global frameworks down to local practices. This is not just a technical challenge, it's an institutional one, and it's also a cultural one. It requires aligning policies, investment flows, business models, and it's about also ensuring that decisions are equitable and rooted in human rights. We have noticed that without the participation of different sectors, we cannot make this concept really fly. So we have identified key transition drivers that we need to put in place to work together. The first one is to reduce harm. This includes eliminating, of course, the harmful subsidies. We have so many of them, as you saw maybe in the publication of the State of Finance for Nature. And we need to enforce environmental safeguards. Second, we need to create nature, so restore degraded ecosystems where they are already depleted. We need to invest in nature-based solutions. Third, we need to increase knowledge, so improve data sets, improve monitoring schemes, make disclosures a reality, especially in the finance and corporate sectors. And fourth, we need to enable transformation, which means that we need to talk about inclusive governance and systems change, and of course, cross collaboration. None of these are sufficient if they are treated alone. They have to be mutually reinforcing. While the nature crisis highlights our dependencies and vulnerabilities, it also presents a lot of opportunities. And this is really, really very important to understand. The nature positive economy is not just a framework for solving environmental problems, it's actually a strategy for innovation, for resilience, and for equity. So it actually makes it possible for us to think of new business models, new partnerships, and more sustainable livelihoods. It offers the chance to correct long-standing ecological imbalances and also go into social imbalances. So think about from agriculture to urban development to tourism, nature positive approaches can unlock shared value. Restoring nature is a very smart investment. So, for example, the Institute for European Environmental Policy has been estimating that Natura 2000, which is a network of conservation areas, they can create around 500,000 jobs. But there is this larger report, Decent Work in Nature-Based Solutions, which was led by ICLEI, UNEP, and IUCN. They're talking about a potential of 32 million additional jobs globally by 2030, particularly in sectors such as agriculture, forestry, and nature-based infrastructure. So these are jobs in restoration, sustainable agriculture, ecotourism, also in terms of climate adaptation, in the forestry sector. And many of these jobs, they are local, they're durable, and they're socially inclusive. So nature positive investments can help build resilience and improve quality of life. We cannot manage what we cannot measure, of course. So a credible nature positive economy requires clear and reliable indicators. These should include both environmental and socioeconomic metrics. So these metrics, they range from biodiversity health to ecosystem integrity to equity, governance, quality, participation. We need a mix of local and systemic tools, so natural capital accounting, biodiversity footprints, social metrics, robust corporate disclosure frameworks. We need to do measurement in terms of, seeing the progress, but also learning and making sure we can do accountability and not just compliance. To succeed, nature positive economy must be shaped by all of society. So this is a very important part of the whole concept. It includes governments, businesses, civil society, but it also includes those that are in close relationship to nature. So here I want to highlight local communities, farmers, indigenous peoples, and etc. A key complexity here is that when we're talking about net nature positive, this may also involve trade-offs. So some ecosystems might be lost in one area and restored in another. But who decides what's acceptable? Decisions, they have to be made not only by powerful people, and it should not be made only by technocrats or markets. They require democratic processes, citizens' assemblies, and must be based on local knowledge, but also academic and scientific knowledge, lived experience, ethical frameworks. So the whole of society approach actually calls for the whole decision-making in inclusive ways. In addition, it must require legislation that supports nature positive actions and disincentivizes all the harmful ones that we have in place now. And it needs to complement voluntary and citizen-led efforts. It must respect human rights. So we are here mentioning the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. And of course, the whole part of study related to ecological justice, social justice. So not just in terms of outcomes, but in terms of how decisions are made. And it's not about ecosystems only, as I have been highlighting, is about economic choices as a society. We're not developing this concept alone. So Go Nature Positive is being a very intensive co-production process, and we have included researchers, policymakers, and civil society. So we've gathered input from over 750 stakeholders placed in more than 50 countries. You can see on this slide some key milestones. So we did consultations, workshops, peer reviews, and by co-producing this concept, we want to ensure that it is grounded, it's practical, and it's inclusive. And the final version of this concept, what a nature positive economy is being actually published in some weeks from now. We've also been testing the nature positive economy framework in practice through our pilot cases. So our cases, they span through 6 locations, and we're covering 5 economic sectors. We're covering forestry, agriculture, apiculture, agriculture, they're very close to each other. We're covering tourism, the blue economy, and green buildings. Each pilot will help us to understand how to apply nature positive principles in specific economic and ecological contexts. And they have been providing us opportunities to gather evidence and to see the bottlenecks, to understand the problems on the ground, and to co-design solutions with the local actors. Alongside our conceptual framework, we also want to make sure that we highlight a very essential dimension of all this work, and this is policy. So I want to highlight here the work of our partner Ecologic. They have been leading the work in the sense that I'll present now, focusing on mapping and analyzing the policy and the cooperative landscape that is relevant for the shift towards a nature positive economy. So the aim here is to understand how existing policies, not only the policies that are coming from the governments, but also to understand the voluntary initiatives, how they can support or hinder the transition towards a nature positive economy. So we have been taking a comprehensive view, considering not only the public instruments like the regulations, the strategies, but also we have been considering the businesses alliances out there, the voluntary standards, and the certification schemes. So the scope of this work spans through the 5 pilots that I mentioned, and alongside cross-sectoral instruments that affect multiple domains. So we have been asking questions such as, what are the tools and incentives that are already in place in these different sectors? Which ones align with the nature positive principles? And where do we see barriers, contradictions, or missed opportunities? So this slide shows this approach. And the results from our evidence base for targeted policy recommendation, we're going to be actually highlighting in upcoming sectoral briefs. We believe that policy and businesses initiatives need each other to succeed. So business has a powerful voice in shaping the markets, in shaping innovation, and policy can help with the set of the rules, the incentives, and directing, the systemic change so that we're not depleting nature, but actually regenerating it through our value chains. We think that without the regulation and enforcement part of the game, voluntary actions, they risk being inconsistent, insufficient. So without business engagement, on the other hand, regulation risks being poorly implemented or contested. So we need really here both sides of the coin to really work together. Policy work is not only about diagnostics, it's about creating the enabling environment for us to be able to do the shift. So we've taken a very structured approach, a 2-step approach, I would say. Step 1 involved compiling a long list of policy instruments that are relevant for the nature positive economy. So we covered, as I mentioned, sector-specific and cross-sectoral policies. These included regulations, directives, strategies, and funding mechanisms around, these five sectors that I mentioned. So agri-food, forestry, tourism, blue economy, and the built environment. And we ended up with around 60 policy instruments. Each of these was assessed using a common template and a detailed guidance. So it allowed us to also prioritize based on specific criteria. So the criteria we used were vision and roadmap, funding mechanisms, alignment with nature positive economy goals, and the extent to which they reinforce or reform harmful practices. After this broad screening, we went to the second step and we did a more in-depth analysis of these 20 policies, and we flagged them as being the most relevant and influential. We extracted insights on how to reduce harm, how to create more nature, how to support transparency, and to enable transformation towards a nature positive economy. Some of these policies showed a very strong alignment with the goals from what we have been calling the nature positive economy. Others had very positive elements, but they included contradictions. So you would see, for example, in the agricultural sector, some subsidies are still pushing for intensive agriculture, which is not aligned with biodiversity friendly agriculture. So we kind of use this dual lens, spotting enablers and barriers, and it has been essential for us to shape our recommendations. And on top of that, in parallel, we analyzed over 40 cooperative initiatives. So especially those led by businesses or by civil society. So we assessed the purpose, the scale, and the accountability of the initiatives. We saw that some are promising in terms of ambition and systems thinking. Others are limited by vagueness, or a lack of follow through. You can see here the diversity of initiatives that we looked at. The main takeaway is that these initiatives need better alignment with policy and clearer standards to ensure real impact. The good news is that many EU policies, and actually also global ones, already contain important elements that support the transition to a nature positive economy. These include funding mechanisms, targets for ecosystem restoration, innovation programs, and frameworks for nature-based solutions. However, in practice, these elements are often fragmented across different policies and sectors. So they tend to remain siloed, voluntary, and not very adequately resourced, which limits the impact. So in our analysis, we identified key contributions across the 4 transition areas I've mentioned earlier. So first, under reducing nature negative impacts, and there are some positive steps, such as increase attention to do no significant harm principles, but more is needed. So for example, we need to identify and reform environmental harmful subsidies that incentivize unsustainable land use, overfishing, or high impact industrial practices. We also need to put in place landscape level and jurisdictional approaches, such as zero deforestation policies that go beyond the project-based safeguards. Sectoral roadmaps and measurable targets for reducing negative nature impacts, so particularly in the financial institutions and high impact sectors, are still missing or they are underdeveloped. Second, under increasing nature positive actions, we've seen growing support for nature-based enterprises and for solutions, especially in urban areas, in the sector of water management and disaster resilience. But implementation remains limited across ecosystems and sectors. So there's a need to accelerate the uptake of nature-based solutions in all habitat types, so in coastal, forest, freshwater, and agriculture. Conservation efforts must also go beyond protected areas, and they need to include other effective areas-based conservation measures, which can be more inclusive and locally adapted. Third, for supporting transformative change, there's momentum, but still a gap between ambition and delivery. Bending the curve of biodiversity loss requires not just incremental improvements, but systemic shifts. So this includes short and long-term action plans to shift public and private finance, change production and consumption systems, and establish new metrics for economic success. Emergent nature positive business models, we can see they're coming up more and more, like those that divest from activities that degrade nature and reinvest in circularity, in restoration, and in sustainable use. They need actually policies to push them forward. And we need governments to send consistent signals for them to thrive. And finally, on increasing knowledge, we see that many policies encourage data collection and transparency, but this is also very uneven. The challenge is not technical capacity, it's also about trust, about usability, and about relevance. So businesses need tools that are not only scientifically robust, but also practical and proportionate. So knowledge generation should be a shared endeavor across institutions, sectors, and communities, and not just a compliance exercise. That's a little bit of the problem of the ESG sector, that a lot of people treat it only as a compliance exercise. Together, these findings suggest that while the foundation for a nature-positive economy does exist in EU policy, and I hope also in other areas of the world, much more is needed to integrate, fund, and scale it meaningfully. However, we see that a lot of critical gaps remain. So many policies are still voluntary, and do no significant harm principles are weakly applied. Perverse subsidies continue. The concept of competitiveness often trumps biodiversity protection, and this needs to change. A nature-positive economy must be based on the idea that protecting and restoring nature is an economic imperative and not a burden. So you can see here again the policy alignments that I have been mentioning, and you can see here also the policy instruments that I have been mentioning. So again, really reduce all the harmful activities, make sure that we can create more nature where it was already erased, or restore nature where the ecosystems are depleted, increase knowledge, and of course, support the change. So here you can see our recommendations. What do we recommend? First, we recommend integrating nature into competitiveness strategies. So stop treating it as a constraint. Second, we recommend mobilizing business leadership through clear policy signals and incentives. Third, redirect finance away from nature harming activities and towards regeneration. And finally, strengthen enforcement, turning voluntary goals into legal commitments that can be monitored and can be therefore enforced, so people can be held accountable. Very important to mention, we have been rolling out a series of sector-specific policy briefs for this work that is being led by Ecologic. Each one will give practical, tailored recommendations for the 5 key areas. So again, you see here on the screen, the sectors we're covering, and we'll release them in sequence within the next weeks so that stakeholders can absorb and apply the guidance as it comes out. We are also making sure that we can dive deeper into this policy work. So we're going to have a webinar at the end of June this year, where this work will be presented. And please reach out to Benjamin Kupilas. He is the doctoral person that has been leading this work and policy from the Go Nature Positive project. And yes, I'm very, very excited to enter in conversation with you about this concept. And I hope it doesn't sound too abstract for you, and we can discuss it a bit more with questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Daniela. We already have a question. If you want, you can leave the QR code on for a second. I'm gonna take a picture and put it in the chat. And we already have a question from Pasquale Capizzuto. If you want, I can read it for you. Good afternoon, great presentation. Thank you, Daniela. How this global approach could be functional to the One Health concept of the WHO, which should drive our actions in a sustainable society. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just find you again. Yeah, there you are. Yes. So yeah, the relation to the One Health approach. We're, I think, considering these different economic sectors that we're covering, the health approach, I think it would play a role in all of them, right? So if you think about working with the forest sector, very much so, because we have to make sure that we're doing, biodiversity positive value chains across the forestry sector. I think that the health of the ecosystems and the health of humans also in these areas and beyond, I think it would play a very, very important role. We're not actually in the work that we're doing now. So we have been working for 12 months, so it's not a very long, the project kind of like started to pick pace now. But I think it would be very interesting to, produce a policy science event on the interlinkages between the nature positive economy concept and the One Health concept. So yeah, thank you for this this idea. Yeah.
Are there other questions in the audience? I have a question for you while maybe we wait for questions from the audience. In terms of implementability, do you, your consortium has a timeline?
Yes, thank you, Marta. That's a very good question. So as I said, we've been working not for so long yet, but we do have pilots, right? So basically, the European Commission is funding this project because we propose something different than circular economy, than the bioeconomy. We really think that nature should actually be the main, pushing, let's say, the guiding star of the economy. And for this, it was very important for us to, to have these pilots. And these pilots are all discussing, this concept in their realities. And the idea is that together with these pilots, we put up metrics. So we will actually track their progress in terms of the baseline they have now. So what is the state of nature in these pilots now? And what is the state of nature in these pilots in 3 or 4 years when we, when we end the project? So this project has a time span of 4 years. And yeah, in let's say the end of 2028, we will be, have very, very clear what is the progress that these pilots did in all these different sectors. So they are our test bed, really. And we also want to make sure that we engage with the different target groups in these pilots. So not only, the people in the project that are leading the pilot, but we need to make sure that we contact local policymakers, local businesses, local academia, local standard bodies, because the standard bodies are part of our target groups, because we want to make sure that, the metrics that the project's going to produce, that we can in some way, bring this to standardization. So yeah, I hope that gives you a little bit of a timeline.
Thank you, Daniela. We have 2 more questions from the audience, from the chat. What limitations, this is from Michaela, what limitations of your study are you interested in developing further? And then there is actually a follow-up from Michaela, how can I spearhead a new pilot study?
Yeah, so if I understood the first question again.
Which limitations of your study are you interested in developing further?
Okay, so we see in the pilots, there is a lot of limitation to think about, how to make the value chains actually nature positive ones. Because if you think about the way that we produce this shirt, it's actually not nature positive. It's not producing more nature than what you had before, right? So it's a different way of thinking about production. Like, how can you build into the value chain regenerative practices, right? It's different than the circular idea. It's really to make sure you have more nature than you had before. So it's very ambitious. So what we see a lot of limitations in the pilots. We see lack of knowledge. We see, the business of as usual mentality. So people are afraid to change. We see that the local policies, a lot of times they don't help them to think in this, more regenerative mindset. So they keep doing business as usual. I can say that from ICLEI's perspective, working with cities, a huge problem is the procurement practices of cities. So how cities purchase products and how they purchase services. They have their way of doing that, their list. So to buy something that is nature positive is not really actually highlighted in the way they do their buyings, their procurement practices. So there is a lot of, how to say, lethargy and business as usual. So I would say that's like the biggest limitation. And the only way to change that is really engaging with people and bringing them into this journey of, awareness raising, getting to know the metrics, getting to discuss the problems, to change the mindset. It doesn't happen through a PDF only, it happens through engagement. So we have actually a target in the project that we want to engage with at least 1,000 stakeholders throughout the project. And when we say that, it's not just that somebody signed a newsletter. We want to really be, in interaction with these people. So think about 8 target audiences and at least 100 people. So 800 to 1,000 people that we want to engage with to create impact.
Thank you so much, Daniela. There is a related question from Simone. Simone, would you like to ask the question or would you like me to read it? Maybe I will read Simone's question. Which mechanisms, like incentives or regulations, have you found most effective in driving private sector alignment with nature positive goals, and how might those be scaled across sectors? I think this is a very good, important question.
This is a very good, important question. So we have been noticing, so we have, how can I say, the World Benchmarking Alliance as a WBA. They are a project partner, and they work with a lot of businesses, actually not only in Europe, but also worldwide. And they have been tracking how can I say, the performance of these businesses in terms of nature. So probably you hear a lot of disclosure being done in terms of carbon. So emissions. We are here putting up the flag for nature. And we don't want to actually, split the attention of enterprises. But the idea is that, of course, all these enterprises, when they do disclosure, And we can talk a little bit about the political moment we have in Europe at the moment in terms of disclosure of businesses and their accountability. We want to make sure that when they put their energy into thinking about carbon, they're also thinking about nature. So we have been noticing that sometimes these enterprises, they don't have the resources to do a whole new loop for nature. So we have to think about harmonized templates, bringing it, in synergistic ways for them to report. So there has to be a lot of work done in terms of, the synergies between carbon emissions and also nature, how they use water, how they use the soil, so how they depend on nature, what are the risks. And actually, the message that we try to give here is really that it's not something that they have to do because the government is asking them to do. It's something that is material to their business. It's a matter of materiality. And following a little bit here, Marta, I know you work a lot with risk assessment as well. And so it's in terms of understanding the risks as well, right? Because they depend, the dependencies and the risks. And we think that if we go, through that narrative, it's maybe easier for businesses to understand why they should jump in and why there's reasons. But we're not there yet in terms of the metrics. So there is something, as we speak now, there is a work package that is really focusing on metrics. And in the next months, we will have that actually published and tested. So it's a little bit early days for that, but we did say from the start of the project that it doesn't make sense to not, touch into the metrics, because otherwise it becomes a very abstract endeavor.
So just a consideration, the problem of metrics is really a persistent problem in environmental economics, how to evaluate the benefits of nature. And we know that nature-based solutions are cost-effective. We led a global review of nature-based solutions, but the challenge is always to incorporate the benefits in the spreadsheets of private companies. So maybe in future sustainability lectures, we are going to explore this in more detail. There is a contribution in relation to what you were mentioning before, Daniela, of the importance of involving local communities. David Dow, would you like to read your contribution or share your contribution about the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe Rights of Nature campaign to restore river herring in the Upper Cape Cod watersheds?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, David.
Well, I live in the Waquoit Bay watershed on Cape Cod, and the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribal Reservation is in that watershed. And so for the tribe, the river herring not only provide food, but they're important religious component associated with the river herring as well. So what the tribe has proposed doing under the Rights of Nature campaign is to take over management of river herring in 3 Upper Cape watersheds and restore the breeding areas to increase the population of the river herring, which unfortunately suffer fishing mortality out in the ocean from the sea herring fishery, and they've had declines in the breeding areas on land. So they're trying to work on the second part, the breeding areas on land, and restoring them and having them under their own control so they do a better job than the state does.
Thank you.
David, this is really great. The thing is, it's very, very clear, your example that you brought. Like, there is no way you're going to have an intervention in that area with that river without, looping in, the tribe and the different interested actors. Yeah. And for this to happen, it's very important to have, an inclusive framework so that you don't have how can I say, the risk of people trying to run such a scheme and overruling and not inviting, you know, very important partners. And what I want to mention here in this answer to you or this comment is the IPES Transformative Change Assessment. It has been published 2 weeks ago, the summary for policymakers. And I find it very interesting. And in the project, we're looking voraciously into that publication because it talks about structures, visions, and values. And it's about understanding how different communities value different things differently. And it's about also understanding that there are different world visions. So there are different ways to look at nature, and therefore there are different ways to evaluate it, right? So this all plays a role. Thanks for sharing that link, Marta. And it plays a role. Yeah.
I was just going to mention one part that about the education that the Mashpee Wampanoag youth went to a summer camp with pioneers, and they got them interested in the rights of nature approach. So it's the focus of the start of this campaign came from that event.
Oh, great. And you had also the engagement of youth. That's really amazing. And this is also something that we have been discussing because in our consortium, we have a lot of like discussions about, you know, there are people that are really environmental economists that are doing natural accounting. Yeah. And there are more social sciences people in the project, and actually it doesn't have to be that spread, but there are people in the project that question like, yeah, how do you put a value on nature? Maybe we can put a value, an economic value on something, but if you ask that tribe what is the value, they're going to say, no, it has no price. It's so valuable that there's no way you can put a price on it. It's the same to ask, put a price on your kids or on your mother or on your grandmother. So there's always this dichotomy that we see in the field when you try to, you know, as Marta said, put nature in the balance sheet. Yeah. But on the other hand, we noticed that if you cannot measure the value of things, sometimes you cannot even protect it. So so there's all this discussion around if you start valuating these services and even in indirect ways, for example, connecting to the first question related to health benefits, if you can turn that into numbers, then people start to see the value. And before that, they just take it for granted. So there's also a little bit to know this issue.
Thank you, Daniela. I would like to add a consideration. There is an issue of time scales. Sometimes the balance sheets of private companies are really short term, but when you think about the environment, not as a theoretical entity, but as a biophysical support system for the economy, then without the environment, there is no economy. And so if we are able to incorporate that in the decision-making of the private sector, then we would definitely see a transition, a transformative transition for our economies.
Yes, Marta, but that's exactly that. I think people, they just take that what nature gives us for free is always going to be there, right? But we already see that resources are actually limited. You have renewables, but we need to get there yet, right? So the shift hasn't really happened as we need it, right? But we have resources that they're not infinite, right? So then, as you said, the time frame is very important for a company because then they will start to understand, no, I'm not going to have that forever. So I need to start thinking about how in my value chain or in my activities, I can regenerate things, right? And there's another thing that we talk about scale in terms of geographic scale as well. Why? Because you can think about a value chain. For example, I live in Freiburg in Germany. I can think about the value chain of the, the local farmer, the potato that I eat from him. We eat a lot of potatoes here in Germany. But then if you think about other products, the value chains, they're going to go, up to Brazil or, up to New Zealand. And so it's very complex to also control the legislation if they go beyond many boundaries. So we have to also deal with the complexities of, value chains across different geographies. So this is another important, aspect of the nature positive economy, that is not only local, it also is sometimes, very much beyond local.
Thank you so much, Daniela. Are there additional questions from the audience? Maybe in person or in the chat? Do you have some final considerations or reasons for optimism in your work, Daniela, moving forward? And also potentially connecting beyond Europe. And there is a question. I apologize, Michaela, for not picking up on that question. Michaela asked, who are your intellectual mentors?
I would say the kids. I mean, if I see a kid so innocent, thinking that, nature will be there as it is now forever, we think that as kids, right? We think that everything will continue to exist. But I feel a little bit schizophrenic in a way, because we're talking about the nature positive economy. I don't understand why this is not the way we run the economy, because there's no other way. If we continue to do what we're doing, we're walking. I don't want to be alarmist, but it's just, you just have to see the science behind it, right? We cannot fish all the fish of the ocean without, thinking about regenerative practices. We cannot put poison in all our agricultural fields. So there is really, it's not a concept that I'm talking about. It's a survival mode. Yes, Simone, there's no planet B. So yeah, when I say intellectual mentors, I think about the kids, because they really make me jump and say, oh my God, we have to accelerate the shift. We cannot continue to do economy as we do and just take and not think about how giving back. And I'm not talking about recycling only. I'm talking about creating ecosystems where they are already gone. We need that, right? We need to think about cities, places where we have all these parking lots. Why can we not depave? Why can we not open the soil? Why can we not bring trees back and pollinators? And then thinking about brownfields, instead of just building on top, think about ways to integrate nature in there. Or forests, we have to manage forests in a way that, I mean, I don't want to be alarmist, but it is really a little bit of an alarming situation. The more you know, the more worried you get, right? And then I ask myself, sometimes in Europe, you see people just stopping the disclosure mechanisms, right, for companies. So they're trying to simplify the rules now. So we had 5 years, 6 years of lots of work in terms of, companies explaining if they destroy or if they help nature, in what ways, so that they can look in the mirror to make changes. But then if you have another, it's called omnibus, the omnibus package. This package tries to simplify everything. So it's a little bit of a step back in terms of companies, disclosing what they're doing and how it affects nature. So it's a little bit schizophrenic to see that in a moment where we should all be putting our resources into rethinking how we run the economy.
I would like just to mention for context that what Daniela is describing is a goal of the European Union. For our American friends who might not be aware of this, nature creation in Europe. So Europe has a long history of destroying our nature for 2,000 years, and even before with the Romans. And so the idea of the European Green Deal and the nature restoration law is to create nature in the European Union. If interested, I'd be happy to, when we upload your presentation, Daniela, on YouTube, I will add below links to the resources that we discussed today in case they're helpful. There is one more question I see. Pallavi, if you want, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Martha, and I'll try and make this quick. I was just, all this discussion was making me feel like, the paradigm of, thinking global and acting local, but then also wondering if, the rights of nature, the concept of, rights of nature, how is that being translated in the work that you just presented? And I feel like we are in a sort of a spectrum based on whether you're based in the US, Europe, or Asia, and some places we're making good progress, and others we are regressing. And I'm wondering what you're seeing in your work in terms of representing, having legal standing for nature.
Thanks for asking this question. That's such an important point. And actually, we see more and more of this legislation come up. So there are examples in New Zealand, Peru, Mexico. We have also an example that is being discussed in Brazil at the moment. So, and there are also examples in Europe for that, to give in rights to nature, to rivers, also to forests, and even like to wetlands. So I think that's an important point. And I don't see, how can I say, a dichotomy between that and the nature positive economy. Because if you think about even putting nature in the executive board of companies, right, where they have a voting right in the board of a company. Let's say Nestle has nature sitting there and voting as well. That could be a very strong way to push towards nature positive practices, because it would be a representative there saying, look, but I'm against that type of value chain. There are other ways to do it. I need, ways in a way that I can thrive and I can actually be more and not less in 10 years from now. So I guess that's a discussion as well, in terms of like, how can we bring nature into the executive boards of companies? And so then on the one hand, they have a right secured by legislation, but on the other hand, they're sitting on all, these decision-making boards. That would be, yeah, cool. And maybe we can implement that. Maybe the GBF, the Global Biodiversity Framework, can push for something like that in the next round. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Daniela. I would like just to mention from the chat, thank you, David, for sharing the Bio for Climate online courses. Thank you, Daniela, for pointing for Selina, the NetworkNature platform. I hope it's going to be helpful to you, Selina. As part of this lecture series, I started putting together actually a website with all the resources that have been shared. So at the end of the semester, which is at the end of this week, after the end of this week, I will share with all those who are involved in the lecture as participants or speakers that page of resources in case it's helpful for future exchanges. Thank you so much, Daniela, for being with us today. We are at the end of the hour. I know you're really busy, but it was wonderful to have you with us. And I'm very grateful for everybody who was here and could participate to this event with us today. And hopefully we are going to see you also on Friday, where we're going to have our last Sustainable Solutions lecture of the year. And it's a bit special because it's going to be organized in partnership with the City of Boston. And we're going to have Boston top officials in resilience, sustainability, and green infrastructure and workforce development, which was mentioned today by Daniela, the importance of creating good local long-term jobs. We're going to have all those officials discussing with us about what Boston has done so far and their perspectives for the future. We look forward to welcoming you again at the series, and I wish everybody good afternoon or good evening or good morning, depending where you are in the world. We have a very international group. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Marta. Thank you all.
Ciao,
Thank
ciao,
you so
Daniela.
much.
Grazie.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Grazie.